Well, guys, it's that time of year again where we do the top five most surprising teams for 2023. Um, this list will consist of five teams that I thought exceeded expectations from what they were expected to do this year. Like teams that had a terrible year last year ended up doing better this year, and or even making the playoffs, maybe. So, let's get into this list. At number five, I have the Indianapolis Colts. Now, the Colts were only a four-win team last year with Matt Ryan. They went 4-12-1 and were one of the worst teams in the NFL. This year, going to 2023, they had the number four pick. And with that pick, they selected Anthony Richardson. And Richardson hardly played this year. He only played, I think it was week 5 or 6. He had 3 injuries already. He suffered a concussion against Houston. He suffered another injury in another game. I can't remember what it was. And then the one that ended it all was one of their games against Tennessee. He suffered a broken collarbone, which ended up knocking him out for the rest of the season. So they had to go with backup quarterback Gardner Minshew. And the Colts in my opinion, they did a lot better than what people thought they were going to do. They went 9-8 this year, and they were a win away from the playoffs, and ended up being a win away from winning the division because Jacksonville messed up. And they go into that final game against Houston. Winner will go to the playoffs, and since Jacksonville lost, it ended up being winner will win the division, and the Colts were just a win away from doing it. So the Colts, the reason why they're number five is because they ended up not making the playoffs, and all of the other teams that are on the list did making the playoffs. So I have the Colts at number five. They didn't make the playoffs, but they had a much better year than what anybody was expecting. Gardner Minshew ended up doing pretty solid with them, and I think if when Anthony Richardson comes back next season, if he can stay healthy, the Colts could compete for the AFC South. But we'll just have to see with that. All right, at number four, I have the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams were a 5-12 team last year. They had Stafford for some of that time, and part of the season they didn't have Stafford. And even when they did have Stafford last year, they looked pretty bad. Now, the Rams, everybody was like, oh, the Rams are going to be terrible again. No, majority of people thought that the Rams were going to be good again. I didn't think the Rams were going to make the playoffs. I thought they would have a better season, but they would be like a 7-10 or an 8-9 team. They went 10-7, I believe, and they ended up losing in the wild card round to the Lions. But the Rams did much better than I thought they would this year. You know, Stafford came back. He looked a lot better than he did last year. They had their fifth round pick wide receiver Puka Nacua ended up in my opinion, being the best offensive player of their team. He looked really good at the beginning, but everybody said, well, he's getting production because Cooper Kupp's out. But once the Kupp comes back, Puka's production is going to decline, and that did not happen. Once Cooper Kupp came back, they kept throwing it to Puka, and Puka is going to be a huge, huge receiver for them in the future. And that was a great pick for the Rams. But we'll see what the Rams do in the future. At number three, I have the Green Bay Packers. Now, I think we all have to admit that the Packers did way better than what anybody was expecting them to do this year. In my preseason predictions, I had them going 7-10. They ended up going 9-8, which is only 2 games better, which isn't terrible. But they were super close at making the NFC Championship game this year. They had a 21-14 lead in San Fran, and then they missed the field goal. San Fran scored, and Jordan Love threw a pick. If they didn't blow that, the Packers would be traveling to Detroit for the NFC Championship game. But they blew it. Despite that, the Packers heavily exceeded expectations. I didn't think the Packers would be much with Jordan Love, honestly. And you see, the Packers did not look good to begin the season. September to October, the Packers were pretty bad. They had a pretty. I think they were 2-5 at one point. I think the Packers, And then November hit, and then they just turned things around. Ever since that Thanksgiving game in Detroit when they beat them, the Packers have just completely turned things around. And they end up sneaking in as the 7th seed. They upset the Cowboys in the wild card round to be the first 7 seed to make it past the wild card, and then they couldn't quite get it done in the divisional round. But the Packers did much better. Jordan Love, after that Thanksgiving game, he has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, he had like what 21 touchdowns and 3 interceptions or something. Like after that Thanksgiving game on, Jordan Love has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and I expect that he'll keep that up next season. And the Packers have a really young team, so the Packers will definitely compete with the Lions for the NFC North next year. But we'll see how that goes. And my number 2 pick, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, Now the Buccaneers, nobody expected them to beat anything this year. A lot of people had them finishing last place in the NFC South. A lot of people even had them being the worst team in the NFL and having the number 1 pick next year. I didn't think they would be that bad, but I think I had Tampa at like 5-12 for this season. I mean, going to training camp, the Baker Mayfield versus Kyle Trask to see who would be the starter this year. They were both pretty bad in training camp, and I thought that their head coach Todd Bowles wasn't great or isn't great. I thought like them going on from Bruce Arians to Todd Bowles was a huge downgrade. Like Todd Bowles has been an NFL head coach before with the Jets from 2015 to 2018, and he did not perform. They missed the playoffs all 4 of those seasons, and I didn't think he'd do much with Tampa, but so far he's coached Tampa 2 years and he's won the division both years. And the Bucks going to the playoffs and they kick Philadelphia's ass in the wild card round 32-9, and then they lose to Detroit in the divisional round. But huge year for Tampa. Baker Mayfield ended up doing a lot better than what people thought he would be. And as long as you have Mike Evans to throw the ball to, it's pretty difficult to look really bad on your team. But Tampa, I still don't think that they're gonna be one of the top tier teams in the NFL. But with how bad the NFC South is, I think the Bucks can still compete to win their division, and then they could try to make a run in the playoffs. They did that this year by beating Philly and making it to the divisional round with a 9-8 record. But with how bad the NFC South is, Tampa will always be in contention for the playoffs. So we'll see how they do next season. And now, my number 1 most surprising team of the 2022 season, I think this one's an obvious choice, is the Houston Texans. First year head coach and D'Amico Ryans, rookie quarterback and CJ Stroud. They win the AFC South with a 10-7 record, and they win their wild card game, and then they lose to the best team in the NFL, the Ravens, in the divisional round. But the Texans heavily exceeded expectations. A lot of people had them being terrible this year, like they have been the past few years. No, they win their division. And then they made the playoffs and made a little bit of a run in the playoffs. CJ Stroud looks really good. Everybody was making fun of him in the offseason because of that decision-making test. I can't remember what it's called. There's a test that all like quarterbacks are going into the NFL take. It says, okay, they give you a scenario and then they ask you like, oh, this is what would you do in this situation? And CJ Stroud got an 18% on the test, and everybody was making fun of him, saying he was going to be a bust. He ended up being the best rookie quarterback that was drafted, and it makes Carolina regret that they didn't pick CJ and they went with Bryce Young. And but Houston, they're going to be really good next few years. D'Amico Ryans was a huge, amazing hire for Houston. C.J. Stroud was a really great pick for them, and he has Nico Collins they can throw it to, and they have playmakers. Will Anderson Jr. ended up being a really great rookie for them this year, and yeah, Houston's going to be a great team, and I think that they're my pick to win the AFC South next year as of right now. But we'll just see how that goes. And yeah, so these are my 5 most surprising teams of 2023. And next video, I will be covering my 5 most disappointing teams from 2023, and we will see you there.